my understanding of Buddhism at large is linked quite heavily to suffering and the inevitability of suffering. In a modern context, I watched a video of you at the KMC in Westville, and you said your hope is for people to learn how to be happy all the time. Two-parter. In your opinion, what is happiness? Follow up to that, what are the steps that people can take to set them on the path to that happiness?
It's an important question, isn't it?
Do you struggle to stay in the present? Is your mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, battling to keep up with the fast, modern-paced world? Have you ever questioned what it means to be happy? Have you ever questioned what love is? What suffering is? And are you wanting to improve and to develop as a person? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then without doubt this episode is for you. Because on the latest episode of the Expect Performance podcast, I have with me ordained Buddhist monk and teacher at the Kadampa Meditation Center, Jampel. And in this episode we cover exactly that, including, but not limited to, the steps that we can take, the practical steps to achieving happiness and to achieving mindfulness, and actionable ways that we can see out the rest of our days here in a present and mindful way, such as learning the art of meditation. I really hope you'll enjoy this episode. Extremely moving, and it's extremely deep, and I think that this has the potential to touch many people and to hopefully challenge you to take more responsibility for the way that you move through the world. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe, and enjoy.
Again, Jampel, welcome to the Expect Performance podcast. It's lovely to have you.
Thanks, Clinton.
So, Gen, can I call you Gen? Or what should I call you?
Kind of Jampel.
Mm?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I know it's a little long, but that's kind of how we do it.
is that how you do it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. It's going to be as much of a learning experience for me personally as it's going to be for our listeners. So I want this to be authentic, and I'm going to have questions, and I'm going to just ask them as we go. So, again, Jampel, what has led you to today? Give me a bit of your life story and your life background. Give me some context for essentially what's brought you to the podcast and where you find yourself now.
All right. So what brought me to the podcast was a WhatsApp message from you. But I think really what you're asking is, maybe these questions, how did I get interested in Buddhism?
Yes.
Why, how have I ended up as a Buddhist monk?
Let's start with that.
Okay. So I'll try and give you an abbreviated version. So scrolling back a number of years, many years, I was working in my profession as a chiropractor, and around the world, different countries, sort of here, UK, South America, and chiropractic is from one point of view you could look at it as physical first aid,
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take long or any sort of deep insight to realize that many of the things that you're helping people with are a result of issues they're having in their life. Yeah?
Couldn't agree more.
So we just leave it like that, you know. So then, then comes a question that I was asking myself again and again. How do you give people advice in these matters, So kind of an ordinary Western approach would be to see a counselor, psychologist, maybe psychiatry, these sorts of things. And prior to studying chiropractic, I'd done first year in psychology. It was one of the subjects that I did. And I wasn't satisfied.
With the content, with what you were learning?
Yeah, I wanted to understand the mind. Because, emotional problems, relationship problems, stress, depression, anxiety, these are things going on in the mind, And I wanted to understand this in a deeper way. I wanted 100% certainty, if I could say. Because, these are people's lives, This is like the core of who they are. You don't want to give somebody advice in that area that you personally are not 100% confident in.
Yeah. You haven't walked that road as well.
Yeah. Even if you haven't walked the whole road, you understand it.
Yes.
And you know the directions. Yeah.
Okay, got you. That makes perfect sense, yeah.
Yeah. So that was the one thing that was kind of driving me. And the other thing was just like everybody, trying to figure life out, Trying to figure it out.
Those burning questions.
Yeah. And anyway, so then started like a very driven search for me. And I just tried everything. Like literally every kind of self-help thing. I did all different kinds of yoga and listened to, motivational speakers, all kinds of things. And through that exploration, I kind of got closer and closer to finding what I was looking for. And what it boiled down to in the end was an authentic teacher. Because all these other things, I found benefit in many of these things. But they kind of, my experience was, and this is just my experience, is they kind of dried up after a while. And often it was because the teacher wasn't in a position to teach from experience. So I then found who became my teacher, the contemporary Buddhist master Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche. So he's passed away now, but I went to a meditation class and I was like, there's something different about this. I remember there was a monk, but like myself now, who was teaching, and I went up to him and I was like a bit testing him afterwards,
Yeah.
Because by that point I was a skeptic. I'd heard everything,
So you went there almost with the intention of trying to poke holes in his theories or beliefs or philosophies?
Yeah,
Okay.
and he just answered all my questions, and I thought, I didn't know what to make of it, to be honest, because it was not like any of the experiences I'd had up until then. Anyway, so I kept going to these classes, and it was an interesting experience for me because up until that time I was incredibly driven, searching, and And then at that time, that kind of urgency just relaxed. It was the most amazing feeling. Anyway, so, I mean, I think from one point of view, you could say the rest is history. However, what I would add was, so I started going to these classes for a while, and my parents were in a very serious car accident. My father was, he was very seriously injured. He was brain damaged, paralyzed, he went blind, incontinent, peg-fed, like through a pipe into his stomach. And he survived for 9 months. My mum was also in the car, not physically as badly injured, but mentally very shaken, very badly shaken. Could you imagine waking up in a hospital bed and seeing your husband of 30 years like that? And I kind of went from zero responsibility. I just worked in my practices, surfed all morning, and because of the nature of his injuries, my father was in an intensive care unit for an unusually long time. Normally people are in there for a little while and then they step down to high care, etc. And as a result of that, I spent an unusually large amount of time in that intensive care unit every day. And there was, of course, what was going on in my own family, and I just watched the people around us trying to help, but seeing my father like this, just literally, I remember people walking into his room, they've come to support the family, and they just walk out with their face kind of sort of expressionless, can't speak, and just walking out because they don't know what to do. And so there was that, and then the close people around us, I watched how just nobody knew what to do. When these things happen, we want to help, and there's a surge of kindness, but there's just this absolute helplessness. So I was observing this in like a close sphere, if you like. But also, sitting in that intensive care unit, I'd watch people come in, because the one that my father was in was Mhlanga Hospital. And it's kind of like a single room with beds around the edge, And I would sit there and watch. Because he was unable to speak, a lot of the time I'd just be sitting with him, often talking to him. But often there would be times of quiet where I just had my hand on him, and I'd be watching the people in the room. And you see these families coming in and they're just broken. And it's intensive care units. Some people don't leave. It's happening continually. And I can remember driving home one night. And, up until that point, my refuge for things was I'd go surfing, And I was driving down, like from Mhlanga, you drive down and you can see the Golden Mile up to the bluff and all the lights stretching out there. And I was thinking to myself, if this is my refuge, well, the one part of me was like, how can I go surfing now when people are in this condition? That was a thought that came to mind. But another thought that came to my mind was, if this is my refuge, what's going to happen when it's taken away? Like looking at my father. And you think, well, this hasn't happened to you. But if you think about it, eventually we can't use our body, either from accidents, age, or sickness. And the little bit that I learned from going to those Buddhist meditation classes, so of course I hadn't mastered anything yet. And I was trying, like I was really trying. And I could see how if I could actually do what I had learned, I would have navigated that situation in a dramatically different way. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna learn this so that I have experience, so that I can teach anyone who wants to know. So that's kind of the story, and then I decided I'm going to become a monk so that I don't get distracted.
So, first of all, that's quite an introduction, and thank you for being so open and honest about the context that brought you to the journey that you're currently on. Personally, my personal interest, how do you become a monk? What has to happen? What training do you do? Where do you go?
Okay, so I think maybe what's a helpful start to this is, what does it mean to become a monk? Yeah. So the thing that is helpful, like within our tradition, it's not like a degree or a black belt or something, And I have this analogy which I often use to try and explain it, which is kind of ironic because in a way it's the opposite. But like when you get married, it's like a life choice. You make a decision to be with one person for the rest of your life, and then you take some vows to that effect. And it changes the power of that relationship. Okay? So becoming a monk, it's completely different to getting married because that's what you don't do.
Yes.
But it's similar in the sense that you make a life choice to live a certain way, according to a certain code, if you like.
Okay.
And once you've gathered the correct conditions, we make a request for ordination, and then there's a ceremony, etc. That's roughly the process.
The process.
Yeah.
And you find yourself now at Kadampa Meditation Center in Durban, one of over 1,300 worldwide. Can you explain to me what Kadampa is?
Yeah.
How is that? Can you give me some context? Why is that different from, let's say, call it the Buddhist Meditation Center? Why Kadampa?
Okay, so it's Kadampa Buddhism.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a tradition within Buddhism. So there are different traditions. But a little bit perhaps on Kadampa Buddhism in particular, what characterizes it, let's say.
Yes.
So the word Kadampa is referring to someone who puts Buddha's teachings into practice. But more specifically, and there's a little story coming.
Brilliant.
Okay. So a long time back in Buddhist history, there was a renowned Buddhist master named Atisha. He was in India and he had thousands of disciples. He was requested by a king of Tibet to come to Tibet because the people there had no guidance. There was no pure teachings there. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's really remarkable what this king did. He literally gave his life in order to get these teachings into Tibet.
Sure.
So you have to, you put that in real context. It's profound. Anyhow, so Atisha, he's in a bit of a predicament because he's got all these thousands of disciples in India, and yet he's received a request like this. Like, you can't just push something like that aside. Anyway, he receives some guidance, and his decision is to go to Tibet. When he arrives there, they make a request to him, please give us something that everyone can practice. Yeah? A union of Buddha's teachings, you could say. So Buddha gave 84,000 teachings.
Wow.
So you could imagine being thrown in the deep end of that and trying to figure things out.
And filter that down.
So what Atisha did was you could say, systematized Buddha's teachings. He put them into what's called now the stages of the path to enlightenment, or lamrim, okay, as a response to what the Tibetans requested, so that everybody can practice them. And so our tradition follows on from Atisha's presentation of Buddha's teachings. So Kadampa is like the union of Buddha's teachings and the instructions that Atisha gave on how to practice them. That's roughly what our tradition of Buddhism is about.
Okay. My understanding of Buddhism and my research prior to this episode, and also just from books that I've read, because there's become a lot more mainstream in the Western world in particular. The likes of Deepak Chopra, etc., have written many books and have massive worldwide followings. My understanding of Buddhism at large is linked quite heavily to suffering and the inevitability of suffering. In a modern context, I watched a video of you at the KMC in Westville, and you said your hope is for people to learn how to be happy all the time. Two-parter. In your opinion, what is happiness? Follow up to that, what are the steps that people can take to set them on the path to that happiness?
It's an important question, isn't it? The deepest wish of every sentient being is to be happy all the time, and to be free from suffering all the time. So maybe your first question is, what is real happiness? Yeah. So maybe we could start by thinking about what isn't real happiness. So yes, Buddha speaks about suffering because this is what he gives the instructions on how to reduce, finally become completely free from. So, we look at us in modern day life. What are we going to have a happy life? Like, let's say my thing is cheesecake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it is my thing. But you take anything.
Yes.
Yeah, and for different people, it's different things. It could be cheesecake, it could be exercise, it could be calling a friend, it could be, I don't know, collecting stamps.
Yeah.
If there are such things still, I don't know. But, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, Buddha takes these things and I guess in a way he's encouraging us, okay, be courageous, because this is a bit of a shocking discovery. But the happiness that we're going for in those things isn't the real thing. And he gives a bit of logic to prove it. He's saying, like, let's say I have a bad day, yeah? And I think, okay, I need a piece of cheesecake. Clearly I need a piece of cheesecake when I get home to feel better. Yeah? there's a little bit of subtext on that. It's like the cheesecake's going to make me feel better, meaning the cheesecake's going to make me happy, meaning the cheesecake can cause happiness. Yeah? So, okay, that's what we're kind of running on, these things. And each of us is different, but we have the same premise in our mind, like, if I do that, it's going to make me happy. So, if something causes something else, it never changes halfway through and causes the opposite. For example, a fire causes heat, cause heat and effect, you know.
Yes.
It doesn't change halfway through and suddenly start making everything cold. It's just, I mean, I know it sounds a little bit obvious, but we have to apply this to our logic with respect to where we're finding happiness. And so if cheesecake is what causes happiness for me, then the more cheesecake I eat, the happier I have to become.
Yeah.
That's what we're running on, that kind of logic.
Yeah.
Yeah? So how are you feeling on piece number 6?
Probably not very good.
It's starting to cause suffering.
Guilt as well, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, the point of this kind of exploration is that this happiness that we get from these things, you know, Buddha, he gives it various names. Like our teacher also, he softened it a bit. He called it changing happiness.
Okay.
Or because it changes. Or artificial happiness. Okay. Buddha called it changing suffering. Okay. This is where we kind of, because we don't like to hear this about our cheesecake habit, you know. Like, that's my, I don't know, that's like my refuge. So,
yes.
So don't say anything that's going to challenge it, please. So he explains that these things that we experience are not actual happiness. They're a reduction of previous suffering. So for example, like to understand that maybe, it's, you know, like let's say you have an injury with immense physical pain, yeah? And you go into the hospital and someone gives you an analgesic injection, a painkiller, and the pain goes right down and you feel, there's a happiness there.
Yeah.
Yeah?
A relief.
Exactly, it's a relief. But it's not actual happiness yet. Okay? He's saying that all these things that we're normally chasing can never give us what we're really seeking. So I need to add a little insert here. Okay? Because in case anybody's getting nervous about all the things they love. When I heard this, I was like, what do you mean? This? It's not real happiness? Anyway. So this doesn't mean that you don't eat cheesecake. It doesn't mean that you don't exercise. It doesn't mean that you don't do any of these things. Like, we need to do these things. But we're just growing wisdom about something that's really deep for us. You know? Even in a relationship. You know, very often relationships are, I'm in this relationship with you because you make me happy. Yeah. So that person is like the cheesecake, in a sense.
Yeah.
And there's this tug of war going on in so many relationships. You have to make me happy, and the other person is thinking the same. You know. But what Buddha is offering us is an understanding of where happiness, real happiness, comes from, so that we can make ourselves happy. And then with that, you can enjoy the cheesecake. You can take that happiness into your relationship and share it with someone. which is actually who we want to be anyway,
Exactly.
you know.
Mm.
So where does this happiness come from? It comes from a peaceful mind. So when our mind becomes still, yeah, a deep happiness and contentment naturally arise from within. And that happiness is different to the happiness from cheesecake. Because the more peaceful your mind becomes, the more pure and deeper and stronger the happiness becomes.
Okay, that makes sense. Would it be fair to say then that to some degree happiness is an absence of suffering?
No, happiness is good feelings.
Okay.
But you can't have good feelings if you're in pain.
Yeah.
So it's like two sides of a coin, you know? You can't wish for happiness and not wish to be free from suffering. Like if you check, everything we do, even in dreams, is to fulfill a very deep wish underneath all the others, to be free from problems, suffering, issues, and to be happy all the time.
Okay. There's two questions that come to mind. I'll start with this one. How does one go about achieving that calm mind? Because in the 21st century, where everything's instant, it's instant gratification, you have sensory overload all the time. For the most part, a lot of people, children and adults alike, have access to their phones from the very second that they wake up, and they're bombarded with news, with social media, etc., 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 with emails, WhatsApps, SMSs.
Yeah.
I can imagine that where we are in society today, it's probably the hardest it's ever been to maintain a calm mind.
Yeah.
So how does one begin setting themselves on that path? Because it is a long journey. What's the first step along that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step starts with a bit of understanding, you know, and that understanding is the problems that we're having of like an unpeaceful mind is coming from our current status of not being able to control it very much, yeah? And that's important because if we don't have that understanding first, it's very easy to be blaming social media, modern times, I don't know, you know, there's so many things like what you've just listed.
Yes.
Like those are the causes of my unpeaceful mind. And you know, I see this a lot. People say, I've gone off social media, I'm having a break or something. Some people even try and go off smartphones, back to the old school ones, you know. And you know, we can understand like a little bit what's going on for them, you know, because we've all got smartphones. It's a part of modern life, and with that you're dealing with this continual stream of stimulus that you have to filter. And there's a lot of unhelpful knock-ons that come from that. Like, we want to live lives where we move, like we have deep, beautiful experiences, and yet kind of we're developing a habit of scrolling and just skimming on the surface, because if you wait too long anywhere, you're going to not keep up, you know?
Yeah.
So if we understand, you know, it's the phone, a phone is like a hammer. You can build something amazing with it, or you can smash a window with it.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It's not the phone, it's not the social media. It's how we are getting addicted to it or getting stressed out in response to it, which is all our mind misbehaving. Yeah?
Makes sense.
So the beginning, you know, so let's say the project is develop and maintain a peaceful mind. Yeah? There's something that we need to do in order to achieve that. A bit like here, people come to your gym to, well, maybe not all of them, but there are probably some who are sports people. You know,
Yes.
they have a project. They want to improve their game in whatever they do.
Mm.
So they come to a gym to empower that, physically empower themselves in their sport. So we're training our mind now. I just gave away the clue there. I was going to say the training session's name is meditation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, you know, somebody who's interested in beginning this journey, the first thing we need is to find a place like our center, you know, that's why it exists, where they can learn a little bit about these things and set themselves up, and then begin meditating. You know, even if they're far away from a meditation center, you can still start to meditate. It's helpful to have guidance that isn't an app.
I was going to ask you about that because
Yeah.
I use an app for me.
Yeah.
So I use Headspace.
Yeah.
And that's what I use to meditate.
Yeah. So we can definitely be introduced, and there's definitely benefit.
Mhm.
Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But the effect of being one-on-one, you can't recreate on an app. It's a bit like if you were teaching as a trainer online.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've designed a program and they're watching videos of me do it versus me training somebody one-on-one in person.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
And there's another thing that happens, you know, is that you start to connect with other like-minded folk, like you would in your arena, you know. And if we really want to make progress, we need this community as well, actually.
Yeah.
Like doing these things on your own, although this is the modern illusion, the striving for independence, you know, you can't compare the two. You know, we need a community around us of people where we can carry each other as well. And we need authentic instruction. Anyway, this is all sounding very official. What's a more helpful and encouraging beginning is, you know, just setting aside a little bit of time in your routine to do a meditation. Just watching your breath, for example, can set you up for the day before all the worries kick up and all the dramas start taking hold. If you can sort of wedge it in. First thing in the morning is first prize, but people have different routines. But you do need to make a plan.
To get it done.
Yeah, otherwise I'll do it when I get time.
Yeah, it's the same in the gym, yeah. You know, I'll set aside the time. The longer that the day goes on, the more likely there is for something to crop up and for that to get booted into touch, so to speak. You spoke about the cheesecake. And the way that you spoke about the cheesecake makes me think of attachment. And we're all attached to certain things. Sometimes they might be material objects, sometimes they might be people, sometimes they might be maybe even recurring thought patterns. Does attachment serve us in a constructive way?
I could answer that as a yes or a no, but I think what I'll do instead is have a look, like a brief look at what attachment is.
Yes.
So, maybe an example. I think maybe attachment to a partner is one that comes to mind, because attachment can be very strong. So, how does that attachment develop? So let's say you're at work and someone comes in and they come over to you and they put something down on your desk and say thank you. But they've got a little sparkle in their eye or something, and you're like, I never noticed that about this person before. They're amazing, you know. Anyway, you perceive some attractive quality about them. Maybe it's like the way they flick their hair, or I don't know. It can be something completely ridiculous if we check in retrospect. Anyway, but then what happens is this process of kind of like daydreaming. Yeah, so you start thinking about them and their attractive qualities, replaying it. And the more you're doing this, it feels like you're starting to see more clearly what you hadn't seen before. What's actually happening in the mind is that your mind is starting to exaggerate things. Okay. So the attractive qualities that you've perceived are now getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The more, Buddha called this paying inappropriate attention. So the inappropriate attention causes in the mind an exaggeration of those qualities. So it's experiential, you know. If there's something that you're attracted to, you feel more attracted to it. You know, that's the inner experience of it. So that continues to a point where you feel like you need the object, whether it's a person or cheesecake. Yeah.
Could it apply to money as well?
Yeah.
So there's an attachment to, I want to earn X.
Yeah. We get attached to the fulfillment of our wishes. We get attached to many things. But the important part in attachment, like we understand that process of it, the conclusion of the development of attachment is that our mind becomes mixed with the object or glued to it. So it's a distortion of the mind. Attachment is a distortion of the mind. And once it's developed, you know, we call these delusions in Buddhism, the development of these things. So once the delusion of attachment has developed, it's definitely going to cause pain.
Okay.
So I have this example to help to understand it. Like imagine if we were sitting next to each other, there was no table in between. And I had a thing of super glue. I said, just roll up your sleeve a bit, and we're just going to glue our elbows together. Put the super glue on and touch our elbows together. Because it dries quickly, yeah? As soon as it's dried, what would you experience? There'd be like a little bit of angst, yeah? Because you know that if you're going to be separated from, well, eventually we'd have to separate our elbows, and when that happens, there's going to be a tiny little wound there.
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, there's going to be pain before that, and a wound, and then pain afterwards. Yeah? A bit like the end of a relationship. And in our heart, we know it once the attachment's developed, and then it starts to kick up all these things. Like in a relationship, it's like people start becoming needy, controlling, because the attachment needs protection now. And this is also one of the wisdoms that Buddha gives, you know, like how to understand these things, because until we have some insight into this, like in a relationship instance, we would call all of those things part of love. But in truth, they have nothing to do with love. Love and attachment develop together until we understand them and we can separate them. The attachment only causes pain and problems. whereas love only has good results. It never causes any pain. At the moment for us they're mixed, and so we think it's one and the same thing. And so it goes with attachment to our ideas. You know, we have an idea for, like, our future, our 5-year plan, whatever that might be, you know. So the thing is, with that 5-year plan, you imagine your future, and it's filled with things that you like. You pay, until you've got some insight into this, you necessarily are just going to pay a heap of inappropriate attention to those things, exaggerate the attractiveness of your ideas until you get glued to them. And then it's like, once the glue's dried, now if it doesn't go your way, you're going to be unhappy.
Is that because once the glue's dried, it's hard to separate yourself from that thing that you're attached to? It becomes ambiguous, it's all one and the same.
Yeah, and when you do, it's painful.
When you try to then separate, on your terms or not on your terms, regardless, it's painful. So then, speaking to attachment, again, does that come back to the clear mind? To avoid, how do we avoid those situations? I'm thinking now, if there's an attachment of mine to a financial goal, for example, I want to earn X. How would I go about, what are practical steps that I can take to go about the process of making sure that I can separate myself from that attachment? If at the moment I'm having this realization where I'm realizing now I'm super glued at the elbows, how do we begin unbundling and unpacking and going through that process?
Okay, so you know, once attachment has developed, and this is why I like understanding, which is why I generally recommend people to attend classes if they really want to get on top of these things, because you know, it's the attachment develops out of ignorance, so we need to increase our wisdom if we want to protect ourselves permanently from these things. But that's a job that takes time. But in a kind of a closer sense, if we understand how attachment develops, and we find we're already attached, depending how strong the attachment is, we have to be realistic about how we're going to release ourselves from it. It's a little bit like training and letting go. And you can train to let go of things in meditation. Yeah? For example, if you do a breathing meditation, and just keep it real simple for now,
Yes.
you'll want to be focusing just on your breath, and then like maybe your financial plan pops into your meditation, you know? And you're like, okay, no, I want to be watching my breath now. So you train in letting that go and coming back. Many times within one meditation session.
Yes.
Okay, you're training.
I've experienced that, yes.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of understanding, you know, if the glue is dried, it's going to take time to release yourself from that. But you can also use what shall we say, the agony of that process as fuel to learn how to prevent getting attached in the future.
I like that.
It's very powerful because the suffering of attachment is very powerful.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a breakup is a very good example. Like, I mean, I think short of really nasty things, it's one of the most universal and most painful things humans go through. Purely because of attachment. So there's many things we can learn to work with this. Attachment is has a self-centered foundation. It's about me, making me happy. And like in a relationship, love is about the happiness of someone else. And we can start to do this in all of our endeavors, even our business endeavors. They can be entirely focused on myself, my family, my this, my that, or I can be doing them for the benefit of others as well. Yeah? You're shifting the foundation here. Yeah? So we can learn these kinds of ways of thinking. We can also bring in things like understanding impermanence.
I love that. I read a book, Zen Buddhism. It's on Zen Buddhism, it's a wabi-sabi, and he speaks about the impermanent nature, impermanent nature, and the imperfect nature of everything.
So both of those can be used to prevent attachment. For example, with the cheesecake, like before applying any of these things, I think it's a perfect source of happiness that's going to make me feel better after a bad day, you know. But in truth, it's not the nature of the cheesecake. Cheesecake's going to make me sick. That's what it's going to do. And if I recognize that, then it brings that attachment down. Yeah. Like, obviously, you know. And the impermanence of things is that, take something else. What else? Let's say you've got a new car and you've become attached to your car. There's this kind of unsaid feeling that you're going to have that car in that state forever. So anything that challenges that, you know, and like, but the point of applying impermanence to it is we know that car, while we're speaking, if you could time lapse it, it's aging, decaying, things are falling apart that you can't see. The car that you were looking at, getting attached to, has disappeared already. There's something else in its place. You know, and the more we think about these things, there's less to get attached to. And then you can enjoy them without attachment.
Is that the goal then? To enjoy them for what they are, free of attachment?
Yeah.
I think that's quite a powerful thing, eh? To enjoy something for what it is, free of attachment.
Yeah. And we can do it. But we need some help, you know, we need some guidance on these things. And we need to explore our mind. You know, Buddha's teachings, people sometimes say to me, you know, what is Buddhism? And we are exquisite at complicating things. So I have a wonderful answer in response to this. Buddhism is the practice of Buddha's teachings. Thank you. I'm just kidding. But it's like that.
Yeah.
So then, of course, the question is, what did Buddha teach? Buddha taught how to develop and maintain a peaceful mind, eventually all the time, no matter what's going on externally in your world. These are the methods, the instructions that he gave after mastering his own mind.
Is that what it means to be enlightened, to some degree?
So, enlightenment. There's many levels of understanding what is enlightenment. And you know, I could give you a definition like it's the inner light of wisdom that's permanently free from all mistaken conceptions, and whose function is to bestow mental peace on every living being every day. But there's a lot of unpacking to do in that.
Of course, I'm sure, yeah.
But maybe what's a better way to go into this is to think it's a transformation of our mind, beginning wherever we're at, learning to recognize, reduce, and abandon our negativities and the causes of our suffering, until we reach a point where suffering ceases permanently. So this is something we can gather in our understanding of enlightenment. Ceasing permanently. So no more experience of pain of any kind. Okay? And, we were talking about the two sides of the coin. So that's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is experiencing, I want to say real happiness, but it's an understatement. The description of the experience of enlightened beings is spontaneous great bliss. As you enter into different scenarios, but this is your inner experience. But also, it's a completion of realizing our potential to help others. And, like often we want to help others and we just bungle it, We have a good heart, but our capacity, our skills, in fact, most of the time we can't even help ourselves. So it's this potential that we have. Buddha teaches how to unfold that to a point where we can be living in modern life, experiencing these things and being able to really make a difference.
I think that is very profound, and at the same time a very concise explanation for what the essence of Buddhism is. I think it captivates, that's the right word, it captivates the essence of it. Another popular term that's become modernized and used in Western society quite a lot is karma. What is karma?
I want to say, how long have you got? But let's give it a go. So karma means action. Direct translation, karma means action. But what's being referred to is a special instance of the law of cause and effect relating to our experiences and our actions. So, in truth, karma is, like you said, it's kind of a widespread thing, If you, in the morning, if you're getting ready to go to work and the person you live with gets to the toaster first and pushes it down, and like, okay. But then as you're walking out, they trip over, and you're like, aha, it's your karma, So it's kind of like in everyday speech,
exactly,
you could say. And also, it's not exclusive to Buddhism. You find it in other spiritual traditions, like you reap what you sow, and you find some understanding of it in many places. But Buddha gives explanation with a precision that you can't find anywhere else, like detail that I couldn't find anywhere else. But just as a beginning, it's like as we complete an action, it has an effect. Okay? The effect is like planting a seed in your mind as a potential. Okay, so mind is something that has no physical qualities. Potential the same, I think we can say. Yeah. But this analogy of planting a seed is helpful because, you plant an acorn, you don't get a banana tree that grows. It's always an oak tree. It's just dependent upon the seed that you plant. And so everything that we are doing, saying, thinking, like physical actions, verbal actions, mental actions, we plant a seed as a potential in our very subtle mind, like our deep level of mind. And those potentials are for experiences. So let's say I'm a kid and I see some sweets in the local store and I make a plan to steal them. Fizzes. Do you remember those?
Mm.
I wonder if they still have those. Anyway, you make a plan. You make a plan to go and to steal them, and you pull it off and you don't get bust. You share them with your mates. You're like the hero. So it looks like there's no effect, okay? But I've just completed an action of stealing. Potentials in my mind now, my very subtle mind. And seeds, they require certain conditions to germinate, yeah? And I always think of what's it called? The Namaqualand daisies.
Yes.
You know, like there's this landscape of dry, arid kind of Karoo, you know. If you look at it when it's dry, that's all you see. But let the rains come, and then all of a sudden there's like a sea of flowers. But if the rains didn't come, it would remain arid till the next year. And the next year the rains come, sea of flowers, because the seeds are all over that landscape waiting for the right conditions to germinate. And so it is with these potentials in our mind created by our actions. So 30 years later, I'm picking my kid up from school, and someone, remote jams my car, steals my laptop out the front seat. And I'm like, why? Why? But that seed from stealing the fizzes has been sitting there, waiting for the conditions to come together. The conditions came together, something that had value to me, somebody with those kind of intentions close by, ripens that seed, experience happens. Yeah? So, virtuous actions with a good-hearted motivation plant potentialities that ripen as good things happening to us. Neutral, and non-virtuous or harmful, like the stealing example. And so, moment by moment, we're having experiences. They're all of these seeds ripening, one after the next.
Reaping what we sow.
Literally. Yeah. So that's a beginning of an understanding.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many levels to it. Unfortunately, one podcast episode is not nearly enough time to do a deep dive into a lot of what we've discussed. But you've given such a fantastic overview and concise summary of these principles, and there's, I think, a lot of practical tools that people can start to apply in their lives once they've finished listening to this episode. So I think it's a fantastic way to round off what has been a very enriching conversation, certainly from my side. So where can people find you if they want to reach out, if they want to begin this unbundling, maybe if they're attached to things that they realize that they need to pull the elbow off, detach the elbow from the super glue, or if they want to start to become clear and clarity of mind, where can people find you and start that journey?
Okay, so our centre is in Westville, and we can give you the addresses. You can maybe put it up for the people who are listening.
I will.
And there will be, there's many different avenues of contact. We have social media channels, WhatsApp channels, and we have a website. If you Google Meditate in Durban, you'll find us. And through that, you can find different meditation classes close by in Durban surrounds, and probably coming soon, we're going to add one online class back again.
Nice.
So that's a good way, but everybody's welcome, you know. And I really mean that, you know. People sometimes see a Buddhist monk and they think, well, can only Buddhists go there?
Mm.
But the answer is everybody's welcome. Absolutely. You know, what we offer is for anybody who wants to try and learn to find some inner peace, take some tools away that they can use in their life, learn a bit of meditation, and overcome their negativities, access their potential, their good qualities, bring them out. And anybody can be benefiting from that, you know.
Last question that I like to ask many of my guests, and I never include it in the prep for the show notes because I like it to be authentic. Is there anything that you've changed your mind on recently?
Anything I've changed my mind on? I think there was this instance with someone close to me who was behaving in a fashion which I didn't appreciate, let's say. And I could feel a little bit of like negativity rising in my mind. And I thought, oh, this is, you know, your natural thing is to blame that person. Yeah. And I was thinking, hold on, you need to apply some teachings here. You know, like this is your moment to actually do something with this. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, you know, the first thing is like look inside. I think, hold on, it's actually you who's responding to this thing, projecting this image of this person. I thought, hold on, like get a little bit into their shoes. And as I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, how can you be thinking like this? And it was like, new view of that person. New view. Kind of a kinder view.
Yes.
And it's interesting because all that tightness, all those feelings just disappear. I'm fortunate that I have things to draw on, you know, and apply, but it was like, wonderful. Now I have to apply effort to hold this view.
That's important.
Yeah, because the previous one creeps up, you know. It creeps up and it's already got a little bit of momentum of its own, which you have to now oppose, if you like. But what a wonderful project.
I love that. What a wonderful way to finish. Again, Jampel, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Not so fast. It is such a cool feeling when I see that Spotify subscribers number increase on the weekly, when I see the number of people listening to the episodes going up. And it really makes a huge difference. Have you ever done something and you feel so good when you get rewarded by some positive feedback and you really feel like you're making a difference? That's what it means to me, and that's how I feel. And it goes a long way. If you like the show, share it and subscribe it. Thank you humbly, and I'll see you next week.